How many times have you blamed gaining weight? I think of the freshman 15 as kind of this classic. We blame going to college, having to cook for yourself, and so maybe you're choosing some cheaper foods as the reason why you've gained weight. But there are so many times that your environment is actually influencing your biology, and not in just a weight type of way, but I've noticed this in business, and it's a cycle that I've really noticed in my own life and in a lot of my clients' lives. So I was really called and felt it was really important to talk about this on the podcast and on YouTube and be able to share this kind of insight and wisdom that I've gleaned over the past couple of years, especially going through my PhD program, and some of the just experiences that have kind of come up for me, the things that are going on in my life, in my clients' lives, that if you don't talk about it, if you don't share about it, if you don't share what you know to be true, and share that with the people that you think that you can help, I feel like it's always doing a disservice. And so I have noticed this really fascinating thing. I've noticed it for the past probably about 2.5 years. Now that's the tail end of my PhD journey, and which meant it was a lot of finishing up my practicum, which is like practical hours spent doing the thing that you're getting your degree in. And it also meant doing my dissertation, so my research project to finish up my PhD. So this is really fascinating to me. I have watched my own life and these certain cycles and the things that I would do in certain cycles if I wanted something. I'm going to preface this with, I've been watching these cycles since I started my first business. And I started to notice that the environment around you, right? Not just the place that you live, not just your home per se, but I want to say the environment as more of the friendships and the habits and the relationships that you have, how much they actually influence your biology, but also your bank account. And so this is really an episode for every single person, because every single person, if you're here, has some type of interest in your health, right? Like we're all trying to be, feel good in our bodies, or we have that desire. It may be ebbs and flows where it comes in importance, which we'll talk about, but also your bank account and what happens in your business. So this is something that I've noticed in the past 2.5 years. And this is kind of like, it's very vulnerable. I don't know. I've never really been one to shy away from these conversations, but I could see how it's hard to share this with hundreds, thousands of people and being like, okay, well, here it is. Here's all my stuff. In the past 2.5 years, I have gained around 30 pounds. It's a lot. It's also something that it's sneaky for me. If you've never met me in person, I'm a tall woman. I am 5'10". So 30 pounds distributed amongst almost 6 feet of body. And I distribute weight pretty evenly. It's really hard for people to tell. To be honest, like nothing really changes for me as far as like clothes that I can fit into until I hit about like 15 or 20 pounds, which is a blessing. I'm not saying anything. I recognize though how my body moves, feels, how my thoughts are, and how business as a result of when I'm carrying physical extra weight actually affects my business, and it affects the way that I show up in my business. And I don't mean getting on camera. I have no problem getting on camera now, 30 pounds heavier. That's not really a thing for me, but it's more of the way that I feel inspired, motivated, and moved in my business. And this has been something that I've really identified because I watched it as my business, or as my as school started to ramp up, and it required a lot more focus and attention, because during that time I'm also taking classes, right? So I'm doing practicum hours, I'm doing my research project, and I'm still in class. So it's a load on top of being a wife and a mother and a human being, a woman, taking care of myself and trying to meet my needs as much as possible, and also being a business owner. Right, so there are a lot of different facets right there. I'm trying to keep my business still going, still running, while also all this other information is coming in. And so you need to really identify and look at, okay, kind of what season am I in my life. I recognized in this season was not a season of business growth for me. And that's okay. It was more of sustainability. But here's what kind of happened is when my business was growing and amping up, I had a lot of what you would call in like Ayurveda of like pitta energy, lots of fire, lots of ideas, lots of movement, lots of action. And if you have ever worked with me in business, whether it's been a client or I've done a couple of business partnerships or collaborations, I'm very much we have an idea, I like it, let's go, let's move, how do we do this? I'm not a sit back and kind of analyze for a long period of time. I feel like the greatest momentum and the greatest ideas and inspiration often come from action. You can't wait to feel inspired. It's like once you take the action, you feel more inspired. And that's always been really true for me. So I recognize that this time in my life, and maybe it's a season for you too, that those 2.5 years required actually a lot more absorption. Okay, so you might find that you're in this space of maybe you're in school and you're absorbing a lot of knowledge. Now, here's my theory. The freshman 15 is not necessarily a weight thing or a movement thing always. I think it's more that the body is in the state of absorption. More often, you're being stretched. Your nervous system is being stretched. So you're in this new environment, new friends, probably new job, new responsibilities. It's your first time really doing a lot of adult things on your own. And so when people go to school, their nervous system is stretched to capacity. They have less ability to they're just trying to survive. Well, when that happens, a lot of those functions of the nervous system that are more creative and are more regenerative shut off because survival is most important, adaptation to your environment. So this is my theory. The freshman 15 is we're absorbing a lot of knowledge. Think about information coming into the brain, right? More information, more information, more information. And your body is assimilating that information, digesting that information, and having to do something with it, but really not taking action on it quite yet. So if you're, becoming a doctor, or if you're getting a degree in business or marketing or psychology, maybe you ultimately want to be a marriage and family therapist or something like that, you're not actually putting those things into practice yet. You're just absorbing a lot of information. So my theory is that actually a lot of the freshman 15 has to be that you're in a little bit more of a state of like a kapha state is what we would call it in Ayurveda, of a little bit more sitting, a little bit more observing, a little bit more kind of more mental, but not necessarily the busy of the vata energy, which is a little bit more airy, but this is a lot more grounded, right? And what happens when your body's trying to ground? When you're trying to ground, your body will often gain weight. It's literally trying to weigh you down, which I feel like is really fascinating. When people feel unsafe, a way of protection is actually to gain weight, to keep people away. This is my theory on kind of the freshman 15. Now, here I am in school and I'm noticing I'm starting to gain weight. I'm not doing huge things differently. Now, at this point, 2.5 years later, that I've noticed it for a long period of time, I recognize now my eating habits are significantly different, but not so much that it should have affected that in that way. I have noticed though, as soon as I was done with school, the amount of energy I actually had to go work out, to go do things, drastically changed. I was still working out 5 days a week, moving 7 days a week. If I'm not like lifting weights, I'm, taking a yoga class, I'm going for a walk, I'm doing a handstand class. Like movement to me is an everyday thing. I might have rest days where I don't go to the gym, but I still take my dog on like a mile or two walk once or twice a day. I might be working on my computer and roll out my like walking pad. And I think, so none of those things had really changed, but what I did notice, I'm telling you this because we're going to get to where you need to identify some things, is when I did this, during this time period, I didn't make huge changes in the way that I lived. We moved homes right before this all happened. My husband's business is doing well, great. My business is, I've made some kind of lateral changes, but again, I knew this was not a period of creativity and change. So the only thing that's really changing is that I'm bringing in more information and my nervous system is significantly more taxed. I'm having to absorb a lot more. Think about food, okay? What do you do when you eat it? Within the body, it breaks it down and it assimilates it and does what it needs to, whether it's, using the lipids or the fats to help with hormone balance and regulation, the glucose from your carbs to regulate blood sugar to energy levels, the proteins, like all the different building blocks of food, right? Your vitamins, your minerals, all those things that are assimilated, and then they have a job to do in the body, so to speak. They have something that they're supposed to be doing. Now, when we ingest a lot of information, and again, the system is kind of at this capacity, at this stretch, there's lots of newness coming in, but you're not really doing a lot with it yet. Even if you don't feel anxiety, it can still be at capacity. And I think that for a lot of people, they do not realize what dysregulated nervous system and a nervous system that struggles to be resilient because their baseline is so high in the sympathetic overdrive, right? Their fight or flight is on way more than it's not. And so then as a result, their rest and digest, they don't really know what that feels like. And a lot of times it actually feels uncomfortable. It feels uncomfortable to rest. And this is what I noticed, is that I was at such a state of needing to get things done. And even though I was managing it well, that it also meant it was a lot coming in, but not a lot of output. And so you might be in this state as well if you are somebody who, again, is going back to school. I see this a lot with parents of young children. Your nervous system is stretched to capacity. You love them to pieces. Again, I loved school. I really enjoyed most of my classes and things like that. So it's not the same as like enjoyment and regulated are not the same. Okay. And so you might be in those early stages, you might be starting a new job. Sometimes you're starting a new relationship. And so that sensitivity and that awareness that's a little bit more heightened might be processing a lot of your relationship habits, things like that. You're noticing, and you're kind of like, not just women, men do this as well, but you're a little bit more hypervigilant of your behavior, their behavior, and what it means to you. So a lot of times, there's that joke of like fat and happy go together. When people get together, they gain weight. I think it's really the beginning, their nervous system is a lot more hypervigilant to the other person's, and they're doing a lot of activities together. They're discovering new things about each other, stuff like that. And that feels good, and your body's able to maintain that for so long, right? And it becomes a lot less like kind of newness and hypervigilance. And it slips back down into a little bit more rest and digest. Having to operate at that level and then being able to slow down, the body's like, and when you do that, often the body is trying to regulate, but it's one of those things where it's been a lot of information, a lot of newness, a lot of stimulation, and having to be on guard. And now you don't have to be, but your habits don't match that yet. So you might be in a new relationship, new job, new, again, parenting. I would say I was like this, and I didn't know it at the time. And I wish I had had information like this when it came out, because as a young parent, and just as a parent in general, when the children are young, you're so much more attuned and hypersensitive to the needs of them, and having to shift and change your life, that you are often a lot more dysregulated than what you think. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Again, you want a nervous system that's resilient, that can take these things and come back down, but we operate at such a high stimulation that there is no baseline. The baseline is basically too high in general, that it's almost like this low level of fight or flight constantly, rather than actually being downregulated, knowing that there's a season for everything. And that I think, at first there was probably about a year where it was really difficult for me, and it kind of consumed a lot of my thoughts of this, like gaining weight. I had done fitness competitions in the past. I had done a refeed and came back into like a really good homeostasis. I could eat quite a bit. If you aren't familiar with bodybuilding shows, everybody has different styles of how they approach it, but essentially you're lowering down your body fat so that you can see more of your muscles that you've developed. And then the biggest difference was that I did both times basically a recomposition. So I slowly inched back up towards my maintenance calories and things like that, where my body could handle it. And it stayed like that years and into my 30s. So, and that's what people don't realize. They're like, oh, well, I'm this age. It's not age. The precursor to a lot of degradation of systems within your physical body is actually long-term and long-standing stressors and the inability to keep up with your lifestyle. And I don't mean lifestyle as in just food and drink and things like that. I actually mean what's going on in your life as far as mind, stress, stuff like that, because that signals and cues different hormone production into your body, which can affect how you approach food, things like this. And even business, if you're very insulin, you're kind of on the border of like pre-diabetic, very insulin resistant, things like this, you might then realize that a lot of that, and again, I think diabetes, there's again types that you're born with and there's types that develop from lifestyle. So we're taking this in context that it's, two different understandings of how that works. But the space that you're in your life is not always you're not always meant to have every part of your life be exactly the same. If you're in this space of absorption right now, where there's a lot more information or it's requiring you to put a lot more effort, that might mean that other parts of your life are going to take a back seat, and they should. Okay, so you can't be in the season. And I think this is something that I've seen over and over. I saw it in bodybuilding, I saw it in business and things like that. You can't be in a season of like comfortability and sustainability and growth at the same time. So a lot of times it almost has to toggle between the two. So I saw this in bodybuilding where it's like people want to build all this muscle so that they could see it, right? Come showtime. The problem is when you're cutting down calories, the body is like doing the bare minimum to preserve, right? It's using glucose very, very quickly because it's like, hey, you're not feeding me enough glucose in or things like that. I'm having to use the reserves in my body. I'm having to use fat storage. And whether you're doing that through like ketosis or, there's so many different ways. And I think many work for different people. It's definitely not a one size fits all. However, that's the general idea, right? You are eating less than what you're consuming. Now, when you're like, okay, I need to, in order to be ready for this, and this is a very structured and strategic thing, you're not going to be at a space where you're going to grow a lot of muscle. You might grow a little bit, but the reality is it's not very much. And you're trying to sustain what you have. So in business, what happens is you're like, okay, I need to streamline some things and I need things to be consistent. This is not the time that you're creating all these new products. This is the time where you're really zeroing in on your systems, you're zeroing in on your hires, you're zeroing in on what products are working well for you, and you're pruning away the things that don't work. Just like in bodybuilding, you're like, okay, I no longer can eat this excess amount. I have to prune it out in order to get really clear and kind of funnel down into my goal. When you have the energy to create more products, when you have the energy to create muscle, there's going to be more of a feed that comes in. So this is kind of what I've noticed is that as this feed of information has come in, I've not only, again, more information, I've actually held more weight, but as soon as these responsibilities or this need to be more of this season has gone away, all of a sudden, internally, this is not something that I'm thinking about doing. This is not something that I'm like, I should actively be more creative, or I should actively have more desire for business, or I should actively have more energy at the gym. These are things that are a natural byproduct of removing that state of absorption, or that state of, again, that nuance where your adaptation, or your, again, gleaning new information, kind of more of that quote unquote survival. I'm just trying to maintain where I'm at right now while some of this new information comes in. That means that like all of that refinement and all of that growth and all of those creative processes kind of take a back seat. And when you look at this from these states of a lot of like Eastern medicine, that's very normal. And I think we are so conditioned to be like, we always need to be in summer. We always need to be creating. We always need to be going. We always need to be amped up and excited and have energy and have this motivation all of the time. And the reality is, I'm recording this at the beginning of 2026. I know it won't come out for a couple of weeks, but that the state of winter time is meant for more of the pruning process. So I kind of went through and talked about this in an earlier episode at the beginning of the year. I think it was actually the first one to launch this year. But I talked about how I kind of do this pruning process basically through January. It's not that I don't have things that I'm thinking of for the year, but I don't implement any of that stuff in January. I go through because I want to enjoy the time with my family, I want to enjoy the holidays. I don't want to feel like this is a last push sale, all these things at the beginning of the year. That never feels great for me. If there are those things going on, I have set them up way ahead of time. It's part of the reason that I record podcasts and things like that way ahead of time, is that I'm not recording at the week of and feeling the pressure. That doesn't feel good for me. I like to have things set up and ready to go, so it takes a lot of the pressure off to perform and be on now. And so what happens is you basically, I also have 2 kids that have birthdays like at the end of the year, like right around Christmas. So it's a lot of just like holidays and birthdays and travel, and it's a lot. And so that season for me is not a season of like creating. It's a season of, I'm just trying to get by. I'm just trying to keep like a decent house clean and like bake some fucking cookies, okay? Like and you know, do my job. Like, I'm not trying to create all of these new things. And a lot of times what I'll do at the beginning of the year is I kind of go through and I'm like, okay, what do I already know that I want to create for this year, or that are on the books for me? And then what feels really good? What are some of these things that I would like to work on? And then I do that basically knowing that I'm coming into a different season. So if you know that you're kind of through this certain season of life, let's say you're in the beginning stages of parenthood, right? You've just become a mom or a dad. And so it's requiring a lot more energy of you when you get home. It's no longer kind of you time, stuff like that. This is not going to be the season that you're going to implement all of these new things. You're going to keep it simple and do like 1 or 2 things throughout the entire year. Or at least 6 months. That way you can acclimate a little, giving yourself a little bit more space for these things that you're not always meant to be producing and creating. Sometimes it is meant for pruning, adapting. If you even think about like agriculture and stuff like that, they plant, I can't remember the cycles, but they don't plant in the same field every single year. They give the fields, they rotate them. So there are off seasons, because otherwise you deplete all of the nutrients out of the soil, which is really telling. All things in nature have this off and downtime. It's not forever, but we have a very hard time. Like, there's so much pressure to like bounce right back after having a baby, to, you know, go from 0 to 6 figures in a year when you just start a business, to, you know, within 3 months lose all of the weight. And it's like, the reality is that there's a lot of things going on at one time, and you are not a singular like thing, right? You're not just there to like lose weight. You're not just living life to make money. You're not just living life to like sustain the life for this other human, you know, this other child. We are very multifaceted. And so understanding that there are certain things that are going to come forward in certain seasons, and those things are going to take front stage for a little bit, and other things have to be in the back. So that meant like during my PhD, things like that, like those needed to take precedence. I could not monitor what I was eating and how much I was exercising or whatever it was during that time. I'm like, okay, the point of getting to the gym is so that I move and I feel good in my body. If that means I carry a little bit of extra weight because I'm not as tight on what I'm eating, that's okay. I still move really well. I'm actually more flexible now. I've gained more flexibility. What's interesting is because of the body and the need to kind of pull back in intensity there, I literally could not, you guys, I was deadlifting over 300 pounds. I was squatting 220. Like, I was moving some really heavy weight. And I could not, it was hard for me to deadlift 185. That was like my heavy. And I was like, my body, even though it had the metabolic, like it had enough food and energy to do it, my mind did not. And I think if you take nothing else from this podcast, understand that just because physically it looks like it should be this way, right? It's like the people that are thin on the outside, they're like, oh, they're healthy, not necessarily their body. There's so much invisible like disease and disorder that happens for people that you don't always see it. The mind and the body don't always reflect exactly what you think it should, right? In my mind, I'm like, I really actually haven't lost any muscle mass, which is interesting. I've maintained my muscle mass. Haven't really gained a whole lot, but I've maintained it. I've maintained the same muscle mass that deadlifted 300 pounds, but it felt very hard. My body was not in this season for growing and creating physically. I was doing a lot more absorption. It's like the body can't the body and the mind, even though you can do a lot of things, but it's okay for you to be in a season where you're not required to always be on and always be producing. In fact, you're not meant to do that. So in January, what I do is I go through and I look at what's worked for me in the past year and what hasn't. I'm like, okay, I had these other offers. I had these other, even like certain things that I'm like, okay, I was using what I call my sauna sack. I love it. It's an infrared sauna blanket. And it's like a sleeping bag, and I just hop into it. And I was using that pretty regularly at the beginning of the year. And I really backed off this past year. And I was like, I want to get back to doing a sauna at least 3 times a week for 15 to 20 minutes. And that can be at the gym in like a heated sauna, or it can be in my red light bag. But I want to do that I was doing it once a week. So I want to add in 2 more sessions that are kind of already in my routine anyways. I'm like, okay. So I usually pick certain things that I'm like, these other things are working, but I'd either like more of that, like that's working really well. How can I make it better? And then getting rid of the things that aren't working. During that like pruning season for me at the end of 2025, I actually I was teaching a yoga class. I love teaching yoga. And so it's interesting, as much as I'll do other things and a lot of, whether it's clients or helping, with business or with health or whatever it is, I still really love to teach yoga. And so I don't give that up, which a lot of people are like, well, that would free up time for you. I'm like, yeah, but I love it. So, but this particular time that I was teaching at was just really hard for me. I'm a morning person. It was late at night. It's one of the latest classes I've ever seen really offered. It's 7:35. Okay, so you're at the tail end of your day. I'm usually getting up between 5 and 6 every single day. So having to be on 13 hours later is a stretch. So it just was really hard for me. I'd much rather get up and teach a 6 a.m. class than a 7:30 at night class. That's just my preference. I know some people would hate 6 a.m. They prefer 7:30, but that's just not for me. And I recognized I could feel it in my body, such aversion and dread. No, I love the people. Once I got there, it was great. Loved the people, loved everything, but it did not work with my schedule. It was really draining, and it was becoming where I dreaded that day because I was just waiting for the end of the day. And so then, wind down time and stuff like that after you're done, I was getting to bed late, and then it was hard to get up early. And so anyways, I was like, this is the pruning. I need to get rid of this class. So I got rid of that class. And looking at business, I was like, okay, there's a couple of things that I need to prune and get rid of. Did some of those things. So I really take January to be future casting of things that I know are coming, things that I want to refine and actually do more of, and the things that I want to get rid of. I'm not setting huge aspirational goals. I'm not planning and launching right away. Typically, I'm taking a little bit more time to be more introspective and see what's working and what isn't, because this is not a perpetual summer. You are not always meant to be producing. You're not always meant to be top of your game and at everything. And so understanding that there's going to be seasons of your life where things are meant to come forward, and it's okay that other things take a back seat and you just kind of do maintenance. For the past 3 years, I've done just a lot of maintenance stuff for health, which is interesting because here I am getting my PhD in natural medicine, and I probably have eaten more fast food or processed food than I have. That probably explains the weight gain. But it couldn't be a focus. I couldn't be focused on cooking at home all the time. This is also when one of my children was doing some travel sports. And so we were traveling at least once, sometimes twice a month, things like that. So I was stretched thin in so many areas that it just couldn't be a focus for me. And I'm sharing this story with you because I want you to understand that right now, if you're frustrated that you used to be somewhere, whether it's you used to be making 6 figures in your business and now it's not making as much, or you used to be going to the gym 5 days a week and now you can only get there 2, it's okay that other things take focus and that they're meant to kind of do this dance and rotation. You're not always meant to be 100% all the time, and that allowing that transition, that when those things come into focus, that you're just kind of maintaining and still nurturing those things. I didn't abandon taking care of myself, but it wasn't the making gains, right? Physical gains, whether that be more flexibility, better handstands, stronger lifts, whatever it was for me, that wasn't a priority. School needed to be a priority. Getting these things done needed to be a priority. And so my business became maintenance. Health and wellness became more maintenance and a lot more lax. so that way I could focus on this. And naturally, as that has gone away, the focus and the energy to put into the other two, you guys, the past 2 weeks at the gym, I was like, wow, I am so strong. I have not gained any more muscle, same amount of muscle mass. But I, again, have more energy to devote to those things. So I want you to understand that there's a season for everything, that not everything is always meant to be in perpetual summer, and that you're listening to this in February. This is a really great time to start implementing some things, or start really looking at, okay, really, what do I want for the rest of the year? And now's the time to start kind of planting those seeds. Now's the time to start getting some of those things going, so that when it turns spring in March, you're ready to hit the ground running. So you've done some pruning, you've taken the time to really assess what's working, what isn't, what are the strategies that I think would work better. Okay, now where do I want to go? What are some of those things? Okay, now we're going to take those two things, right? Now we have space because we've pruned away some of the things that aren't working, and we've done a little bit of refinement to make the things that are working work better, and we've planned for what we want in the future. So now we can implement all of those things and take off running when it comes to March. So you're listening to this right now, and I would take the next 2 weeks to really look at what season of not only life are you in, and be like, okay, what's taking center stage for me? What are some things that needs more of my attention? And what are some ways that I can kind of just maintain and honor these other parts of my life without feeling shame or guilt or frustration, understanding that it's meant to be a season and these seasons will come back. Starting to look at some of how to navigate some of those things are really, really helpful for you. I'm doing a lot of really cool things this year, and creating memberships and group events and things like that, retreats that you all could come to. So if any of those things are kind of in your repertoire of like, you're like, I really want to build community, come to a retreat. I really want to learn more about, okay, maybe my health needs to be a focus this year. You would be great for more of the membership where we're learning how to be our own medicine. You know, so if you're building a business and you're like, I just feel like I'm hitting the wall, I don't feel like things are moving, stuff like that, maybe applying to work one-on-one together would be a good fit for you. The reality is you're meant to work in these cyclical natures, not just for overarching, right? Think about it like winter is more hibernation, spring is more planting the seeds, growth is in the summer, and then reaping what you sow in the fall. You know, it's not just those things, but that there are also different parts of your life that are going to take those seasons as well. So it's almost like taking it down another layer to analyze what's working in your life and then be able to make the changes that are necessary. And not everything needs to change. We don't need to do something for every little thing. In fact, on the podcast episode back in January, we talked about basically 3 pillars. And so one of your pillars might be more forward to you, and the others, like where that one has like 3 or 4 goals for the year and the other ones only have 1. Perfect. You don't need to go full force, because a lot of times when that happens, then we feel like we don't keep the promises that we make to ourselves. So start simple, apply those things, and then come back to the other things. Keep it really, really simple, and understand that your body and your mind and everything that you are, right? You are not just your business. You are not just a parent. You are not just a woman or a man. That there are so many facets to you, and they're not always meant, one is not always meant to, you know, all of them are not meant to be leaders at the same time. That you can kind of take these things in seasons and apply what you need, and then come back for the others. They'll still be there. So if you aren't already following, please make sure you hit the subscribe button. We drop episodes every single Tuesday, whether that be if you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening on Spotify or wherever you can find your podcasts. I send out an email and kind of ask for suggestions of things that you want to talk about or learn about, things like that. So please make sure that you're following along, and you're always welcome to shoot me a message and say, hey, I'd really love to know more about this, and I will put that on the list of topics to talk about. So until next time, cheers.